Please welcome the president of the board of the Santa Barbara International Film Festival, Doug Stone.
I'll get to this. So it's night 7 of the 28th annual Santa Barbara International Film Festival, presented by lynda.com. To get things going, it is my pleasure to introduce John Horn. John is a staff writer with the Los Angeles Times, writing on film. It's my pleasure to introduce John Horn.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming. I'm going to go very quickly here because I think we want to hear Quentin and see some clips. Throughout this conversation, we'll be looking at clips from Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, Jackie Brown, Kill Bill Volumes 1 and 2, Death Proof, Inglourious Bastards, and Django Unchained. But we're going to start first with a montage of the work of Quentin Tarantino.
Ladies and gentlemen, Quentin Tarantino.
Thank you very much. Great reception.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, by the way, thanks everybody for coming out. I actually didn't realize this was such a big deal, and so I'm actually rather taken aback by all this goodwill and love. Thank you very much.
We got a lot of stuff to look at. I want to start first. We're going to talk about writing tonight. We're talking about Quentin's screenwriting. You come at screenwriting as an actor first, not as a screenwriter. And I'm curious what that brings in terms of your writing. What does that mean to be an actor who's writing? And do you write something that you know you're going to hear?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's funny, I never took any writing classes, but I did take acting classes. And one of the things is, even to this day, most of the adjectives I use during the writing process are adjectives actors would use, trying to get into character, or taking it where everything goes. You know, it's like the actors that I really like are the actors that really invest in their character, invest in the backstory, invest in who that person was before the story started, maybe who that person is after the story's over. And even invest in, okay, the story says they turn left, but what if they turn right? What would happen then? And just because the story says you turn left doesn't mean people have free will. They could actually turn right. And then there's a whole other thing that could happen. And so it's that idea, that thought process when it comes to characters that I think I bring to my writing. You know, now, by the way, that actually is how most writers write. It might not be how most screenwriters write, and I'm not saying that as like I'm not saying that to put screenwriting itself down. There is a reason why somebody would actually write something and actually want to be finished around page 120 and have an idea where you're going. I kind of like doing it the novelistic way, where I have an idea where I'm going, but it's like when you know how to get to somebody's house, but you don't exactly know the exact directions, but you can kind of find your way on your own, and you trust you'll end up at your friend's house. Well, that's kind of how I like to do it.
Meaning your characters are going to go where they're going to go.
Yeah, I mean, for better or for worse. All right, actually, I actually think doing this now long enough, I actually think if I had more control over the steering wheel, things would get done a little easier and get done a lot better, and maybe even the story might be even a little bit better. And that might very well be the case. However, I don't want to do that. I want to create these characters, and I'm helping them out in the first half of the story. But if I'm doing it the way I want to do it, the way I think I should be doing it, they need to be taking it over by mid-story, and then I'm just following them.
So how do you turn off the director in you who's watching these characters go in that direction, is like, that's an interesting direction, I can't film that, or I don't want you to go that way?
I don't do this that much anymore, but before I would actually follow them down that rabbit hole. I would just, go down with them, and I would write this really stuff I thought was really terrific, but ultimately it's not what I wanted to spend a year of my life making. But it happened. And I was informed by it, and I learned something from it, and it was cool. And rarely can you take it and cannibalize it and put it in stuff that works, but it was still an interesting process to go through. That happened a lot with Kill Bill, because I wasn't in any hurry of finishing it. I just really wanted to have the experience of going through the bride's experience. And, I have gone down that way. Now I'm a little bit more, no, that's not the most interesting way. I'm gonna stop them. But actually, I don't have to. I don't really have to do that. I haven't had to stop them from going anywhere that I thought was just completely a fool's errand.
When you're writing a scene, I mean, we looked at these clips. There's there's a precision of the dialogue, but there's also a precision of the imagery. And when you're writing, are you picturing how that scene's going to look, or are you listening to how it's going to sound?
Well, it's really funny. When you ask me a question like that, and that's a really good question, but when I give an answer that almost makes it say, like, well, this is how it is, well, it's a mix of both. It's a mix of both. I mean, when I'm writing, I'm trying not to, the director's not really there. He is there. And he is there for, like, I come up with some idea of some maybe cool cinematic set piece or something I could do, particularly in an action set piece moment. The director's there a little bit. But even under that circumstances, I'm still a writer trying to make a good page. I'm still just trying to, I'm trying to put the words together in a way that's both clever and talented, and it works like literature. It doesn't work like, it can be bad literature, but it works like literature. It's not just a blueprint of what's supposed to happen. And that's what really I'm about when I'm writing. I'm about expressing myself artistically as if this were the only thing that I was ever going to do, as if there was never going to make a movie from it. I'm going to write this, and maybe when I'm done, I won't make it. Maybe I'll just publish it, and that'll be enough. And if I give everything I'm supposed to give to my scripts, that should be my feeling when I'm finished. You know what? I love this. It's mine to fuck up.
When that director guy takes it over.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he can fuck it up. I mean, this is tough shit. I don't even know how I'm going to do some of this shit. I always want to, write some stuff that I don't have a fucking clue how I'm going to do it. And then part of the process is figuring it out, and maybe I don't know at the very beginning, but I figure it out at some point from doing it, and that makes me a better filmmaker. But I don't feel that way when I finish writing the script. I'm like, wow, I love these pages. I think I could just publish this, and then I'm done, and I'm finished. And that's how I think I should feel. But I mean, even insofar as just even trying the way I would try to make the image right, the way I would try to make the frame right, and interesting and evocative. As I'm shooting, that's how I'm trying to make the page look. I'm trying to make it look pretty. I'm trying to make it look together. I'm trying to have one line take you to the next line, which is what most great writers do. If you look at most great writers, and even decent talented writers, it's not just that their words are evocative, the page looks pretty. The page is inviting. The page makes you want to read it. And that's what I want. That's where I'm at that time period. Now, that doesn't mean that I didn't come up with the idea of the red blood splashing the white cotton balls when I was writing. I did. I wrote, insert, red blood splashing white cotton balls. And I was like, wow, I've never seen that before. That will be really cool. That's a really good image. I lucked out on that one. And I do that. And I come up with set pieces. But for the most part, it really is during that process, it's the writer's in charge and the director's, he's doing something else.
And the director later will say, what in the name of God is this writer done?
The director kind of ignores the writer. The director kind of ignores the writer. I'm not constantly rereading my script and everything. I literally only have whatever sides are next to me.
What do you, how do you know when a scene, I mean, you talk about a page. How do you know that, do you work page at a time, paragraph at a time? How do you know when something's working, in other words? Are you able to compartmentalize scene by scene, character by character, or do you do it incrementally?
No, I always have to go, scene 1 takes me to scene 2, scene 2 takes me to scene 3, scene 133 takes me to scene 134. I can't hop around.
So you're not one of those screenwriters who puts everything on a board and starts moving the Post-it notes around in order to make them fit.
Yeah, and I can't just jump to the stuff I want to write, or I'll never write the stuff I don't want to write. I have to get to there. And oftentimes by the time you get to there, you don't want to write it so much anymore. It's actually it's an idea that has actually proven itself past its time. Yeah, you wanted to do it way back when, but now you're here, not so important. So it's like, I always have to kind of keep moving forward. That's why, that's why, I can definitely come up for the most part of what's supposed to happen, like I said, and it's one of the things I have learned about myself. I have a pretty good idea what's going to happen in the first half of the story. Now, I have a really good idea what's going to happen in the second half of the story. In the second half of Kill Bill, I kind of figured she might kill Bill at the end, all right? But the way it happened was much different than I thought about, even, forget about before I started writing, but even after like a few months into writing, it became quite different by the time I got to that point in the story. But I actually do think that, again, if you're trying to just breathe these characters to life and have them take over, well, then the middle of the story would be about as much as you could know before you've actually breathed life into them. Once they take over, it becomes a different thing. You shouldn't be able to know that much from that point on. Now, having said that, I actually work in genre. So there is a bit of a roadmap, because if I'm doing a Western, if I'm doing a World War II movie, if I'm doing a martial art movie, I don't want it to be an art film meditation on that. I want it to actually deliver the goods. If you like martial art films, I want you to watch Kill Bill and see a really terrific martial art film. Now, frankly, I want it to be more than that, but as far as delivering the goods for the given genre, that has to happen. And that kind of helps you out. That kind of keeps you on track a little bit.
But you talk about writing almost more like a novelist would in chapters as opposed to a screenwriter traditionally in acts. Do you break it down that way for yourself?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, I could write everything in chapters, all right? I like them. I think they're a lot of fun. And I think they're cinematic. Like a lot of the things that, I remember reading, before you ever make a movie, it's impossible to read now I can read a book and not make it into a movie. But before I'd made a movie, it was impossible to read a book and not make it into a movie in your head. And I found myself wanting to keep most of the literary devices the author had come up with, not just because I was trying to be faithful to them, but I thought with cross-cutting, that could actually be one of the more cinematic ways to present the material. And usually that's exactly what they get rid of when they would do the movie versions. They would take all this jumbled narrative and make it chronological and boom. And I mean, that's why when people, said in particular in the first couple of films, oh wow, you really monkeyed around with the structure. I go, well actually I kind of use a literary structure, to tell my story. That's not really monkeying around with it.
How do you know when a scene is working, or do you know when it's not working? Does the negative prove the positive, in other words? When you're working on a scene and you're fighting it and you're trying to get it right, how do you know when it's working, or is it just because it doesn't stop failing?
Oh yeah, well, that's well, when it's not working, it's pretty easy, all right, because it's just, for lack of a better word, your rucksack going up that hill is a lot heavier, and you're actually really working. And usually that means I should stop that day, that I'm not into it, I'm not there, or maybe I need to think about this whole thing because this is obviously not the right way to go. If it's that hard. If you're in writing mode, it shouldn't be that hard. Writing is some of the funnest times I ever have. It's actually hard enough when everything's flowing at the same time. So if it's that difficult, then conceivably, maybe, you know, the mojo ain't with you right now, you're not connected, you should maybe do something else and pick it up again tomorrow. When it's working, it's a lot easier because you know it's working. It's you're inspired. You know, character A says this, then character B says that, and character C says that, and all of a sudden, and character C just told you something you didn't know. And now you have to work from that. If either the characters in the scene have to work from that new information, but now you're also having to work from that new information. Now, I can tend to go long when I do that. And so I have to be really aware of like, okay, is this holding up? Can this be this long? You know, and I mean, hands down, there's no other, there's no example to the extent that the basement sequence.
Right, the opening scene.
Yeah, well, not the opening scene.
I'm sorry,
The opening scene held. I never had a question.
Okay.
It might be too long for other people, but it definitely wasn't too long for me.
Basement scene.
But the basement scene in Inglourious Basterds, deep in the movie.
Yes.
I mean, deep in the fucking movie, and there's no Aldo, there's no Shoshana, there's nobody you know. A bunch of motherfuckers you just met. Right. And now all of a sudden they're in a 40-minute scene. That's supposed to be suspenseful.
It absolutely is.
In a different language for an American movie. And, you know, it was never my intention for that to be that long. I just started writing it, and it kept holding. It kept holding, they kept talking, I kept keeping the reality of the situation of they could be exposed at any moment. I'd almost exposed them, that it seemed like they got away with it, then something else would happen. And the thing is, if you think it's long when you look at it, imagine when I'm writing it. Because I guarantee you it's longer in my script version, all right, after I got through editing it, all right? It's actually longer. But not only is it longer, I'm writing it by hand, so every 2 pages every 2 handwritten pages is 1 script writing page. So the stack is getting crazy high. And my page number is not 40 pages, it's 80 pages in handwritten script. And I'm like, holy fucking shit. And then I'd go over it again and like, I like it. I think it holds, you know. And dare I say, I think it makes it more suspenseful. I think the longer I can stretch this rubber band out and actually feel that there's more rubber there to give, the more suspenseful it will be. Now, once the script's finished and I put it all together, then I'm not really worried about it anymore. I figure it's worked. But when I'm writing it and it's getting to be that much, and like I said, never seems like 40 to me. It seems like 80 pages to me. But I trust myself.
Why do you write in longhand?
I can't write poetry on a computer, mate. You know?
When you first start writing, is it a character that you hear? Is it a genre that's calling to you? Is it a story within a genre? What is the genesis generally? And it may vary from movie to movie, but does it tend to be the same thing, or is it a combination of those elements coalescing at one time?
Yeah, it's a combination. Yeah, it definitely is a combination. It's like there's a genre, maybe I've always been curious in throwing my hat in the ring, but I'm not going to do that until I come up with an interesting enough story to set it apart. And that story is usually connected to a character. Django is connected to Django. It cannot not be. The Inglourious Basterds are connected to the Bastards. They're connected to Shoshana. I came up with all of them equally. I came up with Londa. I came up with all of them at the same time that I came up with the story in own roundabout way, but nevertheless. So yeah, I came up with. Even Kill Bill, that's equally coming up with the bride as I am coming up with the story. So it is, it is, I want to work in this genre. Here's an interesting story that can work in this genre, that I can explore it, hopefully transcend it, and then here are these characters that I care enough about that I want to explore.
Is it occasionally the case that you're trying to put characters or a story in a genre and the genre spits them back out and you have to say, well, maybe they're better suited for a different genre?
No, I've written characters that didn't make the final cut or didn't even make the final cut as far as like even a version of the script that anyone saw. Maybe I invested in a little bit of them and I just got rid of them. And they might be able to be cannibalized and used into something else or just, wholeheartedly used into something else. But no, not the way you were describing.
I think we're going to show the first block of clips. So let's look at this clip package and we'll come back to our conversation. I don't want to throw a big film school term at you, but there's something called subtextual criticism going on here where you're taking things like Ezekiel, you're talking about song lyrics, in another movie you're talking about King Kong. Are those riffs things that are important to you as a screenwriter in terms of figuring out how to inject them into a movie, and you come up with that riff and then figure out a place to fit it?
No, they just usually, if I did that, I'd probably be guilty of some of the things people have accused me of. They usually do come out of the given moment. Now, I like stuff like that. All right. But yeah, when I started when I started the underground cavern scene in Inglourious Bastards, I did know they were going to play that game, but I didn't know I was going to go completely on the King Kong riff that I did. Nor when I didn't know. I didn't know I was going to go on the Superman riff that I did in Kill Bill Volume 2. Not at the very beginning of that sequence. I think at some point, that was a sequence I rewrote a few different times. And then all of a sudden that came out. And it seemed like a really good way to describe the bride versus who she was versus who she wanted to be. So those, and I guess I did know I was going to do the Madonna riff because that's how I was starting the movie off, all right? And it came to, and I liked that story. I'd had that story in my head for a long time, so I wanted to start it. There actually always is an aspect about my scripts of I'm always shoehorning some old material in there. There's always something I've written for something else that I thought, oh my God, I can finally use this, and I try to squeeze it in. So I'd had that Madonna thing in my head for a long time. But for the most part, when that stuff kind of comes out, it literally, I think the reason it probably works, it's because it is the character trying to express their feelings in a way that another character can understand. Now, the thing about it is I love subtextual film criticism. There's actually few things on the planet Earth that I love more than subtextual film criticism. I adore it. I don't try to engage in it whatsoever when it comes to my work while I'm doing it.
That's probably healthy.
Yeah, that would be bad news. All right, the idea. It's not for me. That's for other people to look at my work and do. Exactly. And maybe that's for me all the time when I'm doing my autobiography or something. And I start thinking about stuff a little bit more in a more subtextual way now that it's done and it is on the shores of history. But you shouldn't know that while you're working. I think that, or else then you're hitting it too hard. You're hitting the nails too hard. You're hitting the points too hard. I don't want to know that when I'm directing the film. I'll give you an example though, because let me put it like this: if I wasn't a writer, if I was just a director out there getting a script, material that I was excited about, that I thought I could turn into something, or that I was generally engaged in, I would probably have to engage in subtextual film criticism in order to make the piece my own, if you know what I mean. To actually have something truly to say.
To figure out what it was about and what you wanted to say.
No, to have something to say. If I come up with my own little subtextual criticism of what this entire story really is about, and now I'm actually shooting that, well, that would be a way to actually gain authorship over the actual author to some degree or another. I don't have to do that because I'm the author.
In your process.
Yeah, exactly. I'm the author. And, but like, just to give you an example, I learned how I didn't want to do that at the Sundance Institute, because I was there with Reservoir Dogs, And I had shot a scene from part of the thing. I was invited to the director's workshop, and we were allowed to do 2 different scenes from the movie. And that was a good year that year. There was a lot of cool people was there, and that was a really great experience. I mean, no one really had ever really believed in me that much at all right? To actually have them believe in me and send me to Utah. I'd never seen snow ever in my life from Los Angeles, all right, you know, and then everything was kind of just there for you to put your best foot forward. I mean, it was a really lovely thing. And I was really touched by the whole thing. And one of the things that they say is, we want you to get out of this experience whatever you want to get out of it. So I went and I did a scene, and I wanted to really experiment with long takes, because I thought that was really groovy. And so I did this whole big long take, and they were basically saying, your shots were really good, but there weren't enough of them. All right, but one of the things is, I'm talking with the resource directors there, resource filmmakers, and one of the director goes, have you done your subtext work? I go, no, what's that? You see, you think because you wrote it, you know everything, but you don't know everything. You've done the writer work, you haven't done the director work, you need to do your subtext work. So he's describing this whole thing to me, and I was, still pretty young at the time, and I was like, oh, wow, is that really what a director does? Wow, really? Tell me about it. And so they're telling the whole thing, and I was actually really kind of excited to go off and give this a shot. So I took, to me, what I thought was like the most obvious scene you could possibly take. I took Mr. White bringing Mr. Orange into the warehouse all by themselves. Mr. Orange, because he's a cop, is saying, please, and he's dying, please, 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 take me to the hospital. Mr. White, because he doesn't know he's a cop, is like, no, 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 I can't take you to the hospital. You can just hang in there. So, I could ask anybody in this theater here, what does that scene mean if you've seen the movie? And you could tell me. But when you actually start putting pen to paper, it becomes a different thing. It actually, a lot of stuff opened up that I hadn't thought about before, because subtext is getting beyond what's the obvious there. And so I wrote down, what does Mr. White want from this scene more than anything else in the world? What does Mr. Orange want from this scene more than anything else in this world? And what do I, as the filmmaker, want the audience to take away from this scene more than anything else in the world? And just even writing the obvious shit about Mr. Orange is dying and he wants to be taken to a hospital, all of a sudden, the more I wrote, the more I realized that the movie was a father-son story. And that Mr. White was functioning as Mr. Orange's father at that moment. And Mr. Orange was functioning as a son, but he was a son who'd betrayed his father, but his father doesn't know about the betrayal. And he's trying to hide it from him as long as he can, because the guilt is really starting to hit him. Yet, Mr. White has faith in Joe Cabot, Lawrence Turney, who is his metaphorical father in this situation. And what does he keep saying? Just don't worry about it. Wait for Joe to get here. When Joe gets here, you're all going to be fine. It's all going to be fine. And what happens when Joe gets there? He kills Mr. Orange. And then actually Mr. White has to choose between his father, his spiritual father, his metaphorical father and his metaphorical son. And naturally he chooses his metaphorical son, and he's wrong. But he's wrong for all the right reasons. That was pretty heavy.
That's fascinating.
And that was pretty heavy. And me as a student at Sundance was in my little bungalow in the snow. And I'm writing all that. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. That's deep. There's a lot of there. Well, I'm glad to know my work has such depth. I'm glad to know that the roots extend that far deep, but I never want to know about those roots again, because I know they're there. And I don't want to tell a father-son story. I want to tell my gangster story. I want to tell My heist story. The father-son story will take care of itself. The father-son story is for everybody else who invests in it. And the father-son story is there because it is deeper than just a robbery. But me, I want to deal with the robbery and let the other guy who's doing the writing, who knows about the roots, deal with the roots.
Unbelievable. I think that segues very nicely into our next assortment of clips. So let's look at the next clip package.
You know, actually, just for the record, I'm loving looking at these movies. Just the little thing at the beginning, watching the scenes, and you know.
You anticipated my question. When you look at something like that, do you remember the things you did right? Are you self-critical? Do you wish there were things that were different? In other words, do you learn from your own, not mistakes, but your own past?
Yeah, well, no, I could totally watch things, and you know, I can totally look at both, in particularly Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, and think, oh wow, I've learned a little bit more about directing, a little bit more about handling extras, a little bit more about handling the crew itself, and production design, all that kind of stuff. That I guess, oh, maybe I shouldn't have had this done. I could have done that forever. But nevertheless, that's actually what I love about those movies now, to some degree or another. They were that Quentin then, and these movies reflect this Quentin now. And, it's to some degree or another, it's actually the imperfections of the early movies that I love the most, because they were honest imperfections. But people like this, there's a lot of people out there talk a lot of things about the fact that, like, oh, I make the movies for me. I make the movies for me, and everyone else is invited, and I'm an artist, I'm doing it for me. And that's a legitimate way to go about it. That's a really legitimate way to go about it as far as I'm concerned. But if that's your way of going about it, you better love your shit, all right? If it's for you, then you better be getting off all the time, 24/7. It's always interesting to you. You can watch it at any point in time, and you're stuck. You have to watch it to the end. And that's how I feel about my work. All right, it's actually kind of, it's like, I'm serious. I didn't realize this was such a big event here tonight. So I was like, holy shit, I was getting fucking, like, I was turning into a turtle sitting and waiting for this to start. I go, Jesus Christ, it's such a big deal. I thought I was just going to talk about my career a little bit, at the film festival after the screening. All right. And I started getting like, all right, before it started. Then I watched the reel of movies, like, wow, that was kind of cool, all right? And I came up here with a slightly different attitude, all right? And I'm digging on the scenes that they're showing. And I'm like, wow, that's an interesting one they chose. Yeah, I see why they chose that one. But man, but the same, look, I've now officially, and I've, a lot of the directors that I kind of have met along the way, that I've met along the way somewhere in the last 15 years. We talk about coming across our movies on the big cable television things, the big movie channels. There's a zillion movie channels now. If you own them all, boom, 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 boom. You're going down like, 30 channels before you get done with the uncensored movie channels. And that's where your movies are going to. They are going there, all right? They're going to have a brief time in the theaters, brief time where they're talked about, and then boom. All right, you're going to hit
Cinemax 14.
Yeah, you're going to hit that guide, and there's the 8 HBO channels and the 8 Showtime channels and the 8 Cinemax channels, and, all going on down. And I've had Paul Thomas Anderson tell me, of all people, Paul Thomas Anderson tell me, that when you come across your movies on those cable channels, you never wish they were longer. No matter how you're fighting in the editing room, all right, for Final Cut, you're never wishing they're longer then. But I can't. When I go through those dials and I see Pulp Fiction, I saw Reservoir Dogs is playing today. All right, I cannot hit play.
You can't.
I can't. I have to hit play. I have to watch it. all right? And I have to watch it to the end. And even if I don't watch it to the end, I can't shut it off, all right? Reservoir Dogs was on today. And I turned it on, and I literally, it was the weird thing where it happens every once in a while when you've done enough movies and you've been around long enough, where you turn on your TV and one of your movies is playing. And it was somewhere in the last 40 minutes of Reservoir Dogs. Boom. Oh, whoa, shit. I turn on my TV, and it's fucking Nice Guy Eddie talking about Sam's Hot Car Lot. And I watched it for a little bit, but I didn't want to watch it to the end, but I couldn't shut it off. I made it louder and did other shit and let it die a natural death.
There is, and people who've seen your movies know there are certain actors that you love working with. And I'm curious, as a writer, at a certain point, do you start hearing that actor saying those lines? And is that a potentially dangerous thing if they can't do the movie? Let's talk about Sam Jackson. I mean, he's so good with your dialogue.
Yeah.
And I know early in the career, maybe you didn't know that Sam was going to be in your movie. Maybe later on, you figured it might work out. But is that something that you rely on? Does it help you hear the dialogue, or is that a dangerous trap if you don't get that person, or if they're ultimately wrong for the part, as the part turns out?
Yeah, well, you kind of described all the things that can possibly happen by going down that route. For a while, Sam said my dialogue so well. Not for a while. He says my dialogue well today, all right, brilliantly. But for a while there, he said it so perfectly that it was hard not to write for him. I mean, I think, I spent about 1.5 years writing Kill Bill. I think for the first 6 months, even though I didn't want Bill to be black, I was writing it for Sam Jackson. I wasn't trying to write it for Sam Jackson. I could not write for Sam Jackson. If I had a cool male character who was going to talk a lot of shit, go figure, he sounded like Sam Jackson. And so that was what I was writing for Warren Beatty. I'm like, I'm writing Warren Beatty to be Sam Jackson? Why not cast Sam Jackson, But then I didn't think this blonde girl killing a black man would be this thing that you'd be cheering for, all right, so, which is a problem for Sam. We've talked about, that's one of the things that's actually really kind of cool about how fantastic his performance is as Stephen, and I think Stephen is actually one of the best characters I've ever written. And one of the things that has actually plagued Sam in these last 20 years that I've been making movies, and Sam's been around, Sam's been around before me, but you know what I'm trying to say, is he'll read the script and go, I want to play this guy pointing at the villain because the villain is the best script and is the best character in most scripts. Well, we don't want to, we can't cast you, mate. Well, because you're black. That throws everything off. Now all of a sudden our movie's a racist movie as opposed to being this or opposed to being that. He wanted to play the Michael Madsen role in The Getaway. Well, wow, we can't do that. And now all of a sudden you're the black man taking this, all this shit that shouldn't come into it, comes into it with him. Shit that Jack Palance didn't have to deal with. Sam Jackson has to deal with. And, and so that was, what was cool in the case of Django Unchained is taking all those loaded issues and actually making it part of the scenario.
I want to ask another question before we start the next clip package about music and about song cues in your films, in Reservoir Dogs and Stuck in the Middle, even Jim Croce and Django. Is that something that you are thinking about while you're writing? Is it something that is organic to the shooting process? In other words, are you hearing music just like you're hearing dialogue while you're writing?
Well, the answer is yes, to some degree. It's a process. It happens all during the time. Sometimes it happens even before I start writing. It's kind of one of the things that makes me want to actually write it, is I come up with a sequence and I come up with like a cool song in it. And whenever I can just put a needle on a record and play a piece of music as I walk around and think about the movie, that's a big important process. I'm actually jumping over the writing process, I'm jumping over the shooting process, and now I'm kind of in a theater, watching the scene with an audience before I've even written a word on the page, before I've even shot something. It makes it a movie, to me. I'm able to jump to the end of it. Now a lot of that, a good half of that stuff, if not more than a half of it, never gets all the way down to the final cut of the movie. But some of it does. And those things that do probably helped me make the movie, probably kept me going during the hard parts.
Because you hear it, because you can picture it.
Well, because it's good. It's just encouraging. It's a gigantic piece of encouragement. I'm able to jump to the future. I'm able to get into a time machine, jump into the future, and sit there and watch this movie, the finished, edited movie, with an audience member, as an audience member. Imagining people who I know, who know me, who dig on me, cheering it, all right? And an audience that I don't know cheering it. Whether or not they do or not, that remains to be seen, all right? But at that moment, that's a very encouraging moment. And because I'm seeing the movie in my head and I'm playing the music that already exists as I'm walking around my little record room or my bedroom, it's like it cuts through a lot of the creative process. I get a teeny tiny piece of the end result. And that, okay, get back out there and do it.
Wow. Let's go to the next clip package.
Let me jump off just a little bit
sure.
from those clips. One of the things that's actually really interesting, looking at that, especially the Michael Park scene, Esteban Vejeo, is by the time that I wrote that scene, I'm very aware of how long my crazy script is.
Are you at volume 2 at this point?
What? No. Volume 2 didn't happen till the second half of editing. Harvey put a word in our ear in a reshoot, but it was still all to be one movie. And I remember writing that sequence, and I'm like, there is no way in hell I'm going to have time for this scene. But I loved the scene. I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was a wonderful character. I thought it did exactly what it needed to do to kickstart this last epilogue-y section of the story, not even its own chapter, like an epilogue almost to the whole adventure. And but I couldn't, and there was other things that fell by the wayside because I know there was no way. But I was like, even if I have to throw it out, even there's no way I can stick it in, I have to write it, I have to do it. And the way it all worked out, I'm glad I did, because it worked and it was terrific. But even like watching Uma Thurman, and particularly Uma Thurman's side of the Bill sequence, it's half the dialogue she says in that stuff is just stuff Uma said to me over the course of the year and a half I was writing the movie. Taken out of context, because it wasn't our context, but it was literally half the expressions, half the lines she says are just things I learned from Uma, from being with her and listening to her talk and listening to her tell stories and listening to her frame emotions and frame opinions for a year and a half as I was writing the script. And, but that's true through about at least half of Kill Bill. It's like, it's her words regurgitated back to her in this genre story.
When you're actually on set, when you're filming your script, is your script a template or is it the Bible? In other words, are the actors riffing, or do you want, in your mind, have you written the movie that you want to make, or does it change?
No. The actors aren't there to riff. They're there to say my dialogue. Yeah. If their riffing is genius, I will take credit for it. But by and large, actually, just talking about Uma. Uma had a Uma had a quote once that's really true. It's as true as I've ever heard anybody, more than I've ever read in Stanislavski, An Actor Prepares. Uma was a diamond bullet in this one thing she said. She said that when actors improvise, if they're not just adding ums and ahs, or they're not adding cuss words, that is called writing. And that is not what you hire an actor to do. You hire an actor to learn your lines and say them. Now, there are exceptions to that. Sam Jackson is the exception. Sam Jackson is a terrific writer. He's a terrific writer in character. He knows how his characters should talk. Now, he loves my words. That's one of the reasons that he works with me. That's one of the reasons he would tackle a character like Stephen, is for with me in my scenario. But Sam writes like I write. I mean, it becomes it's like water. It just really goes together. At some point on Jackie Brown, I was like, Sam, you just add so much to this. You do a lot of movies, man. Do you do this on everything? Because no fucking way do I do this on everything. Fuck all that other shit. I do this for you because I give a fucking shit. And it's just, if I want you to say it this way, and here's why I want you to say, I don't have to explain this is why I want you to say it. He'll just do it. All right, but it is, Sam sings in my key, but he also, really, frankly though, other actors can come up with cool things, cool, wonderful little moments, little off things. Sam's the only writer. When Sam writes in character, he's writing as good as I would write in character.
I want to ask a little bit about genre. Genre gets an unfair rap. You clearly love it. And I'm curious, when you're thinking about genre, what do you love about genre the most? And why do you find such an affinity toward it? And how does it affect your writing? Once you're within a genre, do you take on a different voice as a writer that you think has to fit in that genre?
No, it's just, it's more like, if I didn't write in genre, all my movies would be 5 hours long, because I would be like a novelist that just keeps telling the story through character until I'm done. Genre actually keeps me disciplined. Genre has its own functions that if I like a genre enough to want to do it, I love that genre and I want to throw my hat in that genre. But it's not like, there's some people who make westerns that have nothing but contempt for westerns, so they're going to do their own version. And there's some people who make horror films that have nothing but contempt for horror films, so they're going to do their version. And those aren't normally my favorite westerns or my favorite horror films, all right? I actually like people who do horror films to like horror films. I like people who do westerns to like westerns and actually think about how their western may fit inside of the genre of westerns themselves. Look, I'm a very page-based literary writer, and I wrote a car chase movie. Jesus fucking Christ, but I thought very seriously how my movie would fit inside of the history of car chase movies, and so to me, it actually is a discipline, because it's not trying, as terrific as I think my characters are, and as much as I want to explore them and go with them, it has to work inside of the genre that I'm doing. Like I said, I don't want it to be an art film meditation on genre. I want it to deliver the goods.
But for a movie like Inglourious Basterds, which we'll get to, do you define that genre, or do you let the script go to wherever it's going to go? I mean, in other words, is that a World War II movie?
Oh, yeah,
is it a Western? Is it a spaghetti Western? I mean, in other words...
It's the starting off point, and it has to be the ending point. But inside of the beginning and the ending, I want to... I want to transcend the genre. I want to make it more than just, I started off as a bunch of guys on a mission movie. I want Inglourious Basterds to ultimately mean more than the Devil's Brigade. Having said that, I want it to be as fun as the Devil's Brigade is. If that makes sense.
It does, but I mean, we'll probably see a clip from it, but in Inglourious Basterds, like the mission movie, the opening scene is the map and we're going to go there. That happens probably halfway into this movie, right? And the mission movie maybe has a protagonist. Inglourious Basterds probably has 3, maybe 4. I mean, is that part of what you're trying to do, is take that genre and bend the rules so that they work for you, but they work within the structure?
Well, I mean, it's funny because the thing about it is, on one hand, you've got the bunch of guys on a mission movie, and that's going on. On the other hand, I've never seen the Shoshana movie that I created. And she becomes the actual lead protagonist in the piece. But, I'm using the bunch of guys on a mission to get Shoshana into the story. And that's a story I had never seen before. I never saw the one lone Jewish girl bring down the Third Reich in all my movie watching. I never saw that. And I wanted to see that. But was that exactly what I wanted to start with when I started off? No, but it became that way.
How much of your screenwriting genesis is a what-if question? In other words, you're watching a ton of movies, you're thinking about stories, you're thinking about genres. What if this happened within the genre? Or I like that movie, but what if it went in this direction? Is that part of your creative process? Asking that big what-if question?
It is part of my creative process, but not once I get actually right down into it. It's maybe the first spark of a spark plug, but not the process.
If you're making a car chase movie, do you go out and watch car chase movies, or do you have them embedded that you don't need to? Which is the benefit and which is the downside?
Well, no, in that, I watched a lot of car chase movies because I had to figure out how to shoot them. But not so much as far as writing it is concerned, but what I did realize in the case of making a car chase movie, writing a car chase movie, was the fact that you have 2 different kind of car chases. You have the car chases where the lead protagonists are being chased, and you have the car chases where the lead protagonist is doing the chasing. Now, oddly enough, you're actually more involved with when the lead protagonist is doing the chasing than when they're being chased. But they both have their own qualities, and I wanted both qualities to be in the end chase.
Let's go to the next group of clips. Thanks.
Hold it, before we go to the next clip, I have to take a piss really, really bad. If you have been noticing me squirming in the last 5 minutes, so as we go to this clip, somebody take me to the bathroom.
Now, for some reason, this feels like there is a trilogy forming here, from Bastards to Django to another film. Is that the way you see it too, that there's something larger at work here?
I wouldn't be surprised.
Now, people would assume that as you are more experienced, things become easier, yet Django is a script you worked on for, 9 years, 10 years?
Well, that's
on and off and on.
It's a little misnomer. I mean, I wasn't ever working on it. I mean, it's I have a few different ideas. And maybe I did know the title, Django Unchained. I did know it was an ex-slave, but you would see him as a slave at first. So it wouldn't be conveniently he's not a slave. You just hear about it in the past. No, you'd see him as a slave. And, the idea more or less of the first scene, even though not any of the particulars was there in my mind. But I didn't really know what to do with it, and I wasn't quite ready to do anything with it. So it's, they're like babies born too early, which I was a baby born too early. I think I spent 3 months in an incubator because I came out too early, and apparently that's affected me. All right, so in both these last 2 movies, Inglourious Basterds and Django Unchained, they spend a long time in the incubator, waiting for it to be the right time, waiting for it to be the right time.
Is there an epiphany? Is there something that happens, or is there a process? Is it that the key kind of unlocks a little bit slowly? Do you find the characters really tell you when it's ready to go? Who decides, I guess? Yeah,
it's kind of interesting. I came up with the idea of Kill Bill at some point, during the process of making Pulp Fiction. and was thinking that was going to be my next movie. And I'd even wrote some of it after Pulp Fiction was released. I think I got up to page 30. Not really what ended up being in the movie, but nevertheless. But then I did From Dusk Till Dawn, and then I thought, well, I've kind of like done a Grindhouse movie, and so was looking for something else to do. And so I did Jackie Brown. Then I came up with the idea of Inglourious Basterds, started writing Inglourious Basterds, got lost in writing Inglourious Basterds. My problem is not writer's block. My problem is I can't stop writing.
It's a good problem to have.
It's a good problem to have. Well, yeah.
As long as you can find the story
When you're trying
inside.
to make movies, it's not the greatest problem to have, that you cannot tell a story that's not 7 hours long. All right. I hear your point.
You ever consider miniseries?
Well, I did actually, you know. And now that's a much more serious consideration because actually, what miniseries, television is starting to match movies, and especially if you like a show. It's like, it's hard for you to like a movie as much as you like a show while you're in it. Now, unfortunately, those shows that you like this season, when you try to watch them 6 years from now, not quite the same thing. Season 3 of 24 is not as good now as it was in season 3 of 24. All right, and I'm not putting 24 down. I'm simply saying TV is a medium of now. It's actually what's good about it, but nevertheless, that's the problem about it. Movies is a medium of now and possibly tomorrow at the same time, and possibly really tomorrow. Depends. Nevertheless, if we're watching everything on DVD, as it all tends up to being, and you could actually do a mini-series and it's all like on some DVD, well, maybe it doesn't have to be a medium of now. You never know. I mean, anyway, next time I get myself locked up into doing a gigantic, long fucking thing, I will do it as a miniseries.
You have, in this last question, you have a 30-second film school class you're going to teach. Aspiring screenwriters are going to come in, and they want to hear something that's going to inspire them and motivate them. What's the best advice you could give them, and what's the worst advice that you could give them? In other words, what is the best thing that's been told to you as a writer that helped you, and what's the worst thing that's been told to you as a writer?
Most of these people that talk about writing for screenplays, if they were teaching acting, they would be thrown out and ridiculed. Because at the end of the day, it does seem like, and I'm lumping a whole lot of people, some who may have interesting insights, into one big giant group, and that's probably unfair. But again, coming from like a teaching acting aspect, which is how I learned to write, they all seem to me, a very actor bad word, they all seem to be result oriented. And real actors aren't result oriented, but real writers aren't result oriented. I mean, the actor wants everything they do to be magnificent, and the writer wants everything they do to be magnificent. But novelists aren't result oriented. It's the doing of it. It's the process. It's the getting there. It's the journey. It's the journey is everything. The journey makes the destination worthwhile. You can only have a worthwhile destination after you've had a worthwhile journey. And novelists trust that. Actors trust that. They trust that if they live the part and they are honest and they don't try to predetermine too much, that the ultimate end result will be rewarding. And it seems like people who teach screenwriting go in the opposite direction. Now, that is I'm tar and feathering with a big bunch of feathers and a big gigantic trough of a brush of tar. And maybe some people that I'm hitting with that don't deserve that. But at the end of the day, that seems to be what I hear. And it's also understandable because they have to get the results within 120 or 130 pages. And, you know, maybe if you're judging it by a coloring book and you're getting A's for keeping your colors inside of the lines, then maybe they are right. But that's not how I want to judge it, you know, and it can be messy and and I can write a bunch of stuff and then I have to reduce it down to a certain amount in order to make a movie. But that whole process of doing all that is what makes the movie, if you do it right. Yeah, you could go on the kind of process that I go on and write a bunch of stuff and shoot a bunch of stuff, and then you have to drop a bunch of stuff, and then what ends up coming out is a facsimile of what it is you intended. Well, that would be a fucking drag, and you would have failed, all right? I don't think I've failed. I've succeeded. I've succeeded in a weird way than I could have ever imagined during the writing process, but I've succeeded. And also, where I'm coming from, actually, is those scenes happen. We are informed by those scenes. Yet, it's different, though. There is an interesting thing. Editing is its own form of writing that needs to be taken into account. Because the thing is, if I included every scene, every single scene, forget about, say we were India, say we were Russia, and there's no time limit for what's playing at the multiplex. That makes your movie better the longer it is, all right? If that were the case, you would see a different story than the one that you see now, because things would have happened that didn't happen in the version that I released. And once those things happen, they've happened, and they affect everything. They affect the characters. They affect everyone's knowledge about what's going on. Now, I leave that out. Now, I meant to leave that out. Now, you're not supposed to know what those different things are, because that's not the story I'm telling now. I am telling now this story. But that is kind of interesting. You know, it is interesting by what you reveal and what you don't reveal. The actors said it. They worked from it. They were informed by everything because that all happened. But now I lose a couple of scenes. The actors were informed by it, but you're not informed by it. Now you only have the knowledge that you're given. Well, that's storytelling. That's part of my job.
No, and part of your job is to execute one of the most distinct voices in American cinema. And I think as the clips that we've seen tonight, and as Django now proves, you're the shit.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you. Wow, that was really nice, everybody. Thank you.
I trust nobody brought young children here, because if they did, there's going to be some new vocabulary in their grammar when they come back. I'd now like to hand it over to Roger Durling, the Executive Director of the Santa Barbara International Film Festival.
Hi there, and I need to acknowledge John Horn for his wonderful job tonight.
Great job.
You know, the American Riviera Award was instituted 10 years ago under my tenure, you know, to celebrate an American artist who changed the landscape of cinema. And last year we honored with the American Riviera Award, we honored Martin Scorsese. And all year I was like obsessing about who could follow up, you know, Martin Scorsese in this award. And the fact that Quentin Tarantino is here in the house is just outrageous. You know, Quentin Tarantino is, in my book, a rock star. He's badass. He's a true icon in modern cinema and the only filmmaker since Alfred Hitchcock who has made his persona as much a brand as his film. My love of Tarantino lies in his writing ability. I just think he's so fucking good at it. For me, listening to Tarantino characters speak is like listening to music. Pulp Fiction, Inglourious Basterds, Django absolutely blew me away because of the screenplay. No other filmmaker has been as bold with cinematic language as that man in that corner and with his movies. I love Tarantino's attitude. He doesn't give a yes. He doesn't give a fuck, and he shouldn't. His works speaks loud and clear. He doesn't make action films or westerns or war films or period pieces. He makes Tarantino movies, generous to all of his fans and with his middle finger to all his would-be critics. I love the just don't give a fuck attitude that comes with Tarantino movies. And even his failures are respectable ones because he's so original in his storytelling. There's never been anyone else like him, and there will never be. Quentin Tarantino's storytelling's audacity and his tendency for hungrily rummaging in cinema's vaults is inspiring because he grabs all of those inspirations from other movies and combines them into his own DNA. He's gifted for sure. He's great at what he does, and his importance as a filmmaker is unparalleled. He can be so flashy, so movie clever, but at the same time, he can be so brazenly brutal in ways all of us lovers of pure cinema love. Django, the D is silent, damn it. Django Unchained, his latest, delivers his most audacious scenes to date. The initial meeting of the slave, Django, and bounty hunter Dr. King Schultz in the woods, for starters, but they flow purposefully into a tale of sacrifice and courage, friendship and love that finds the two men embarking on a quest to free Django's wife from a notorious plantation called Candyland. And I played that board game Candyland when I was a kid, and those memories will never be the same. Django Unchained is Tarantino's most complete movie yet. It is also his most vital, raw, most accomplished, most thrilling. His storytelling talents match the ambition of that tale. Slavery is nasty. It's a nasty chapter in America's story, in America's history, and Tarantino has beautifully crafted a story of decency versus evil for a generation that is still grappling with our historical legacy of racism. And this is done, again, uncompromisingly. It's done the way a nonconformist would do it. Much like Inglourious Basterds, Kill Bill, and Pulp Fiction, Django Unchained offer viewers a space to work through some serious payback fantasies. But most of all, Django's storytelling, in its so beautifully crafted screenplay and direction, Tarantino achieves an alarming symmetry and setting in opposition Django, played by Mr. Fox, and Schultz, Christoph Waltz, against Candy, Leo DiCaprio and Steven. They're in a fashion mirror images. The side of a plantation owner and slave is from a house of horrors. And as it turns out, this symmetry and mirror image device is boldly telling us that we are that plantation owner. It's our history and it's our house of horrors. Thank you, Quentin, for being such a visionary. Thanks for being so uncompromising. Thanks for all you've done for all of us who worship you and live waiting patiently for your next work, because we know you're going to challenge us, you're going to thrill us, you're going to rock us, And finally, on a very personal note, I need to say thanks for making being a film geek so fucking cool. I was beat up in high school for loving movies so much and because of my nonstop talking like now about movies, but you have made it okay for all of us film geeks to proudly step out of the shadows of the movie theaters. Not that we want to, especially when your movies are playing, but when we have to step out in the street, we can walk, talk, thanks to you. So please accept the American Riviera Award.
Gosh, I just, thank you. I just have to say, that was, thank you so much for that. That was so lovely, that was so heartfelt, that was magnificent, thank you. I didn't realize there was an award higher than the Kirk Douglas Award. And I won it, yay! Thank you for this. I have to just say that this has been a wonderful night. It's been wonderful talking about my writing process. It's been really cool to deal with the whole writer-director process and actually talk about it more from the pen aspect than from the camera aspect. That's been really nice. You've all been really nice. Thank you for coming out. And this theater is so beautiful and so lovely. I actually first came here, I actually first came to Santa Barbara the first time because I was learning how to ride horses. And a little past Santa Barbara was my writing teacher, and Daryl Hannah hooked me up with my writing teacher, and Daryl Hannah's from around here, amongst other places. And she actually, we went to downtown Santa Barbara, and she took me to this theater. And we just walked in. She goes, "You see, I got to see. We have this beautiful theater in Santa Barbara." And we came in. I saw it. It was great. And it killed me that Django Unchained didn't play here. The Hobbit at 48 frames a second was playing here, rather than Django in a 35mm print at 24 frames a second was not playing here. But I'm here now. Anyway, I want to thank the Santa Barbara Film Festival, International Film Festival, for doing this. This is an awesome festival. It's so good that you guys have such a cool film festival. Take advantage of it. Get the season passes. See 2-3 movies a day. Please do that. And when they're shown here, absolutely whatever. What the fuck, all right? Yeah, whatever, all right? If it's shown on film, absolutely, whatever. Watch it. Anyway, thank you for this. But I really do have to say thank you so much for what you just said. It was really, really lovely, and it meant the world to me. Thank you. And thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming out.